Okay, still dealing with the basic configurations for our project. This time around, let's create some utility classes. Now, this is a utility classes I actually have created more than 5 years ago and have been using for virtually all my projects up to now. Now, to create that utility classes, let's do that in the utility.scss. Now, if you've ever used Tailwind, Bootstrap, and some of the other CSS frameworks, you see that you use utility classes right inside your HTML. With those utility classes, you don't need to write anything in your CSS to get the style that the utility class apply. Right from your HTML, you have that style. So a couple of years ago, I devised something like that. And that's what I've been using, though I tweak it project by project. But generally, most of the utility there suffice. If you look at our project, the finished version, let's take a look for a second. Now, here you have it. If you look at this finished version, for example, you look at this hero section, it's made up of 2 columns, this that contains the text and the one that contains the image. And if you go down, the same pattern, 2 columns, this contains this and this. But if you look at the left column, you see it has a width that is bigger than the one for this right column. If you go down, you see the same pattern. I have 3 columns here. And here I have 2 that do look as if they are equal in width. And I have 1 column here, 2 here, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4 here. And this upper portion and the lower portion of the footer containing these 3 buttons that are arranged horizontally. If I minimize, I get this. This time now, the columns have been stacked one on top of the other. That is, flex direction is set to column now. In the desktop version, flex direction was row. Same thing here. So you see all of the sections where we had multiple columns, the columns are now stacked one on top of the other vertically, which means that flex direction this time has been set to column. Good. And it continues like that. Okay, to column. Now, if you count that now, you see footer 1, 2. This was originally 1 column and still remain 1 column. This is 3. This is 4. This is 5. And 6. So that means I have about 6 places where I have to set display to flex and say flex direction to column, right? Because I have 6 places where I alter the flex direction. Now, because of that, isn't it possible that I have a class, a utility class, that when I apply to my HTML directly, it takes care of these flex directions without having to individually in each section override the previous definition for desktop and have to say flex direction column? Of course, that will make a whole lot of sense. If you haven't actually done the things I'm about to show you, you may not know why that's important. So let's go back to our VS Code. So here now is where I'm going to create those utility classes. And these utility classes are not just for this project. They can be used for your future project. All you probably will need to do is just a tweak here and there. Like I told you, I've been using these same configurations for years, and I'm still going to use it for future projects. Now, because there are quite a bit, I'm just going to paste them so that you don't sit there and wait for 1 or 2 hours while I do the typing. All right, since I said initially that this is not a beginner CSS class, I believe that some of the things you see here, or virtually everything you see here, you understand them, but I'm going to explain everything there. So let me Ctrl V to paste them. I'll scroll to the very top. Now, this is the first utility class here, and it's called row PD. Row PD here is for styling the paddings left and right and top and bottom of each of the rows, right? And if you look at it, we had about 4 or 6 sections thereabout. Look at it. We have about 6 sections. This is 1. This is 2 and 3 and 4, 5 and 6. So now, rather than individually declaring padding for each of those, I have this utility class. Well, you may say, okay, couldn't I have just declared in the body and set a pattern of, 10 VW for left and right and 10 rem up and down? Yeah, of course, I can do that. But if I do that, that's going to be tied to that particular project. But if I deploy this approach, what it means is that any section that I did not want to add this padding, I just won't apply this utility class to it. But if I set it in the body, all the sections will have to abide by this definition. So this one now works better because this is more cross-project oriented than if I had defined it on the body. Okay, so, and again, I took care of all the viewports. This is landscape, this is port, and this is phone. Right, so when I get to the landscape, I reduce the left and right pattern by 7 or by 2.5, leaving me with 7.5. And I reduce the top and bottom pattern by half, leaving me with 5 rem. The same thing here. And finally in phone, I reduce it to 2.5. So with this class, any section, and when I say section, I'm not necessarily referring to HTML section anyway. I'm referring to a section of my page, because of course it will make sense. Not that it is mandatory, but usually you will see that the left side of your design, like this, aligns. Okay. And you see that? And the right side also align. All right. So the gap from here to here is the 10 VW on the left, and from here to here is the 10 VW on the right. And if you scroll down, they are the same. The gap is the same across all these sections. Good. So if I don't want this section, for example, to have that VW, to have that style, I just will take it off from its HTML section. And in that case, this left column will touch the side of the browser, and this will touch the side of the browser. Okay. Of course, you've seen such a design that one of the sections or some of the sections do not align at the left or right. Okay. They have their own alignment. That's a design. Okay. So that's the point I'm trying to make. Good. It appears I spend a lot of time explaining this, but you get the point there. And similar thing happens to this. This is row MG, which is margin, and of course margin, that's the space between adjacent elements or items, right? So here, if I apply this style to an element, that element will have a width of 80% with the margin auto, which means 10% on the left and 10 on the right. And when I come to the tab down to phone, I reduce it to 90%. Of course, this particular utility is actually not even used in this project. But like I said, this is something I have devised quite a while now, and that's what I'll be using. And so here comes this. And this is FL row, which is a short form of flex row, right? So here I have a display set to flex. And you understand what happens when you set displays to flex. It means flex direction is automatically what? It means flex direction here is row. That's what it means. Okay, but I'm going to take it out. Flex direction is going to be row. Now, so what happened is that when the viewport reduces from tab down to phone, I want the flex direction to be column. Okay, I want the first flex direction to be column. So the moment I apply this to a section of my page now, even without doing anything, when I go to my browser and I preview on the smaller devices, it is automatically arranged without having to write any CSS. Just like you would expect when you use Tailwind or Bootstrap. The moment you put something in Tailwind, any utility class in Tailwind, it automatically applies. You don't actually even know the CSS that is written for it. Okay, so this is just like you developing your own Tailwind or Bootstrap. That's that about this class. And the same thing happens here, FL call, which means flex column. So in this case, whatever I apply this to will have a display of flex. And this time I have to explicitly define that flex direction is column. And next, I have a couple of width defined. I have WD2, which means 20%. Any element that has assigned this class will have a weight of 20%. Same thing here, 30%, 35%, 40%, 45%, 50%, 60, 65, 70, and if you want to go crazy, you can go 80, 90, depending on what you want to achieve. All of these width here are assumed to be for desktop, okay? For desktop. Now, let's go to the page again and let me show you this. For example, when you look at this left column, you see that it is wider than this right column. What happened there is that this left column is assigned a bigger width compared to this. But when I minimize, what happened is that all of them then become 100%. They take the entire width of the viewport. That's what happened. So now the same thing, if I have to replicate that here now, I will have to individually say this place, and I'll have to target the viewport by saying at include, my viewport. Okay. And I'll say, in this case, I cannot say width 100%, like so. But that will mean that I will have to also do the same thing for width 30%, 40%, and so on and so forth. And if you understand a bit of programming, that is repeating yourself unnecessarily. So what do? I select all of the widths here, W2, 3, 3, 5, and so on. And I just apply that width of 100% when the viewport is tapped downward to full in just one place. So if I need to make any alteration, or maybe I want 90% for whatever reason, I will only do it in one place. And that's a kind of conformity to the drive principle. Don't repeat yourself. And finally, SM rule. This class kicks in when the device width is port tab and below. So what it means is that any element that I assign this class to will still keep its flex direction rule, even if at desktop level, the flex direction is rule, which means that when it comes to port tab and below, it's supposed to be flex direction column. But with this class, this utility class assigned to that element, the flex direction will still remain rule, even in this viewport. So this is the utility class. An example of a place where it becomes useful or where it is used in our project is here. If you look at these icons, they are arranged horizontally, and that's the same way they were even here in the desktop version. They were still horizontal. Normally, they were supposed to come or become vertical when I minimize or view in smaller device, because that class FL rule still applied to them. FL rule ensures that they are arranged horizontally here, flex direction rule in desktop version, and at the same time, when I minimize, by default, they're supposed to be arranged one on top the other, because if you look at that utility class, this class here, you see that flex direction become column when the width is port tab and below, right? But because I also apply this utility class to it, it retains the flex direction rule. So that's it. And these are the utility classes that we're going to use for this project. And of course, like I told you, beyond this project, most of the projects you do, these classes are still applicable.